to join us, but I think we've got two of you have enough to tell us. You got the Swiss Army knife?
I don't, yeah, I think I have to change my background for you to see it. It's not a Swiss Army knife, but it's, yeah, I'm going to have to change my background for you to see it.
Okay, so basically what we are doing here, let me just put it up for a minute just to say what we are here for, and then we'll just move into the discussion straight away. Of course, you'll have to tell us about yourselves, but give me 1 second. Let me put that on screen. So because what happened was there was a particular session we had in the conference that I did. So someone there said that you normally don't even introduce the topic, nothing, and you just start off on the discussion. So I said, I should put that up. So at least people have an idea what we're talking about here. So this is what we're doing. So this is, of course, look, Reese and Melody, basically we are going to be doing a lot of these discussions and the broader Ombuds, why, what, who, how, when, and where. So we'd already had one, I mean, Reese was there as part of that. So this one, from that discussion, what came out was, I think Liz said that like a Swiss Army knife. I said, so let's discuss that aspect of the Ombuds. So this is what we're doing. And we're doing the same thing tomorrow also, because some people could not, they said they would not make it in for 1 day. So I just put it out there. What days are people available? So we're doing the same thing tomorrow. So that's how it is. And of course, the 1 second to tell people about the Mediator Vikram.com, because there's a philosophy and mediation symposium starting on the 17th. So that's something which, I mean, again, everything is, of course, on my channel, it goes there, but this is what it is. So this is in association with 2 associations in Greece. So the Hellenic Union of Mediators and OPMED there. So you just go there, mediatorvikram.com, you find details of what is happening, what's coming up, contact. On LinkedIn, there is a newsletter. So you can subscribe to that and you get information there. I have both of you, please, both of you don't say that you haven't subscribed. Just say that you've subscribed. Okay, just say it.
I did.
Whatever, it doesn't matter. So Reese, you have to go and subscribe to it also.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, I put the link in that LinkedIn chat so I put it there. So Reese, it's about you first, a bit about yourself, and then Melanie will tell us about yourself, and then we get straight into the topic. Yes, Reese. Reese is not his full name. Yeah, you have to tell us your full name also. I'm not putting it out there.
Full name. So full name is Mauricio Alberto Ramos, and go by Reese, R-E-E-S-E. And I've been an Ombuds now 21 years, and I've been in different sectors. Most recently now at Virginia Tech, in academia, the academic setting. And just as many folks here and maybe watching this video have a passion for conflict. I know it doesn't feel good, but just the promise and potential. So I'm excited by this conversation that I think is going to explore more the how and the idea of some of the Ombuds work we do as kind of a Swiss Army knife.
Perfect. Yes, Melanie, a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I'm Melanie Frizzell. You know that in previous chats, Vikram, that I function out of the U.S., but as we've expanded through our conversations that you're leading us through this international symposium, I feel like we are now truly, I can identify as we are part of a global conversation that is just impressive in many levels, Vikram. And again, I do applaud you for your efforts. Before we get back to the other guests, what I ran down for is this little thing. A patient gave it to me a long time ago after he ran into me in the Publix or somewhere one time in a public setting, and he wanted me to have this. And this is actually a tool that they were given to use when they're working out in the fields to open their cans, to everything they needed it to do to measure a length or to do some sort of a tool. This is what they had to use. I don't know the time frame. I would like to get that data for you, but it's quite interesting. So I'll have to get more into it. But that's what I ran for you to see. Doesn't look like a regular tool to us, but
it can do a lot of things. That's what you're saying.
Correct. Oh, and as mediators, I'll tie that in, is we can do lots of different things, a lot of different things like these tools. We can bring conversations that are multi-dimensional. I think that we do have lots and lots of options. So as these conversations continue to expand, our knowledge begins to grow. As you know, I'm a proponent of experiential learning, whether it be something that's in the past or something that we're about to go through that maybe someone else has not been through. My hope is that we can share something that will help advance people to be in a better way with their lives. So again, thank you for having me, and let's get back to it.
Yeah, and Melanie, you missed the last discussion. You were supposed to come on that, but you didn't. So we had, of course, a broad discussion on each of those aspects. And I mean, of course, there is lots more that can be discussed, but there were a lot of panelists. But so maybe if you want to give your thoughts on other areas of those what, how, when, why, and all that, you can do that. But the concept behind having these discussions is because I feel that there is a space for organizational mediators and the other activities that Ombuds does. Let's have a discussion on that, because the whole concept was that in 50 years, popularity is not really there in the US itself. Because Daniela, she's not here today, but Daniela went out, she's in Georgetown University, and she went out and they went out and spoke to children there on the campus and asked them, do you know what Ombuds is? And none of them said they knew anything about the Ombuds. So in all these years, if we haven't been able to get there, what is happening there? Because for me, of course, it is mediation and mediators, but I feel that this is an area where if the words are coming into play, if words are an issue, that those can always be looked at. But in terms of the work that Ombuds do, how do you want to take that forward so that there is space for mediators? Is there a space only for mediators, or how it has to work? It's a very broad thing, Reese. Don't even think that I know where this is going. It's just opening out the discussion, and then we'll see where it goes. So, Reese, please, Swiss Army knife, question mark.
Yes. So Swiss Army knife. I think it's a great visual. If people are not familiar with it, it's this thing that was created. I think it was World War I, but for the folks that were in the military, so they could have something in the field that they could easily use to open cans and cut things. And so it's a nice little tool kit that's very compact, and you can carry it with you. I've got one in the car, and it comes in handy.
So I mean, and there are lots.
Oh my gosh, there you go.
And so many types. So we have
so
to
many
then.
types.
And this, while we're discussing this, we'll consider various aspects.
Right.
How many things are part of it, can be part of the Ombuds aspect.
Exactly. And for those that are not familiar with the work Ombuds do, I think of it as, well, both as a Swiss Army knife and kind of like this umbrella, in that there's a variety of services that we provide depending on the need. And so when folks reach out, one of the critical questions I always ask is, how can I be of service? Help me understand your expectation, and then that way I can perhaps tailor what I provide and offer. And it might not fit. And so quite often, here's an example. A couple of months ago, someone reached out and they said, Reese, could you do a training down so many weeks, months down the line? And I'm like, absolutely. And let me block that. Thanks for letting me know. 3-4 months in advance. This was in the summertime. But let me ask you a question. Why do these folks need this training? Because I can talk for hours. And if you help me understand, I can not only tailor it, but be mindful of that. And I soon realized, once I connected with them, that this specific team needed not just a workshop, but they needed a whole different approach. They needed one-on-one conversations, a possible facilitation. There were other dynamics at play. And so I was able to not just take out my little workshop hat and say, okay, let me provide that service, but also be mindful of, okay, what else could we offer these folks, this team? So I love the analogy. I think it was Elizabeth Hill that came up with that in a prior conversation. But that's all I'll say for now on that aspect. Yeah.
Perfect. Yes, Melanie. Just a broad introduction to Swiss Army knife, question mark, Ombuds. Yeah.
I'm going to agree with your other guests. Remind me just to reflect on how diverse our function as mediators can be as we're facilitating difficult conversations in companies, organizational companies in crises. There are many things that we can do. We can step in and help find, quote, an elephant in the room that, because they're so embedded in their conflict in a particular organization, and such that it is like this gentleman has been invited into a conversation, can facilitate a conversation, have private conversations, kind of help them pick through the tangled web that is made when we have diversity and difficult issues in the workplace where ombuds can become involved. Mediators, whatever that role is we often tend to, I started to read around on a couple of Fortune 500 articles, and I'll reference here in just a minute, about the Swiss Army knife concept. It's quite interesting, but it does tend to point back to a metaphor, in my mind, depicting, I'll try to quote them, a Swiss Army knife. This came from Forbes. It's under Dell Technologies. It's listed on, you can find it on Forbes.com. Let me make sure. It's called Solving the Founder's Dilemma with the Swiss Army Knife. Harvard Business School is cited in the 1997 publication, Inventor of Dilemmas. So that might be a good read if somebody wants to take a look at it. But when we're talking about a startup business and then the demands as they expand, they get greater, the conflicts are bound to come up. And as this is the metaphor depicting the qualities of being useful or being versatile, it becomes a complex issue in organizations, especially as roles expand, a company's growing, conflicts are arising. And what do we do? How, when, where, why do we get involved in these kind of situations? At what point is it wise for them, these companies that might be expanding faster than maybe their knowledge can, or their money even, how do we help them? And so this article, I found, it talks everything from careers and their basic recruiting techniques to the ventures that they have early on in their business startup. And then it continues as they advance the complexity. So a founder's dilemma is mentioned in here. We can reference that. But the metaphor of the Swiss Army knife is a good conversation starter that you've put on this conversation today, Vikram. It's really neat. It's good. I'm proud you did it. We'll just see where else what we can uncover as we continue this chat today. But I will tell you, in this Forbes, I'll just make another reference to it. Things that we're familiar with, like in the United States, we're all Amazon, Starbucks, Netflix. It's all mentioned in these articles. Customers' obsessions with the things that are being offered. And then it went on down in the article to talk about empowering an obsession at the edge. Now, we all know that in Forbes business, being a Forbes, if you're being written up in Forbes, you've got something going on, right? So I want to talk about that. I don't want to keep dragging it out, but there are several things I think we could mention as this conversation expands this morning or today or tonight, this evening for you, where we want to talk and what roles can it play on tagline plays, things of this nature. So we could bring up a lot of things. So that's what I have at the moment.
Yeah, but what I'm thinking from this is that Melanie is bringing in the concept of mediators, Swiss Army knife, and Reese is bringing in the ombuds, Swiss Army knife, and then we are going to see where the twain shall meet. So that's what's going to happen, Reese. So please, how are we going to take this forward? You're going to tell us various aspects. If you've broken them down into certain kinds of activities and all, please break it down for us, and then we'll see where the two twains shall meet.
Yeah. Neil, and what I'm fascinated by is I gotta believe And if you think about the Swiss Army knife, probably in the beginning, there was like just two multi-functions. It was a knife and it did something else. It opened cans, or maybe it had three little functions. And over time, there's been this evolution. And I think the same with the field of conflict management and mediation. Like, oh my gosh, when I started in the 90s, there were these broad categories: community-based mediation, victim offender mediation. And over time, we added facilitative, directive mediation, and mediation arbitration. And there have been these little evolutions. And I think the same with the Ombuds practice. I don't want to speak for the whole field, but I believe that initially it was Ombuds connecting with people one-on-one and asking what's on your mind. Let me listen to you respectfully. Let me help you think this through.
Right.
And then we added other layers. How can we give upward feedback to the system, to the organization, to leaders? And so there was that aspect. And how we do that, how do we help support the culture and do workshops and trainings, maybe assessments, one-on-ones, work with teams. And so I think there's been this evolution, which is really neat, I think, because things don't ever stay the same, right? Stagnant. There's always that
Right.
evolution. So those are my initial thoughts again on.
No, but Reese, tell me, it's like, I mean, today, like I said, what Daniela did in her university, and I mean, it's when you were going out and talking to people, what is the awareness about ombuds, and have you ever looked at this aspect as what they are expecting from it, and what is it that they're getting, and is there a mismatch there, or they don't know what they can expect, so they don't know where this has to go? What I mean, just a broad kind of a thing there.
Right. Yeah. No. So I would say for ombuds, the term, it's foreign. It's not known to a lot of people. So unless you really know about the field, or you might be like, oh, it's like with mediation. Quite often folks would say, I know what a mediator does. I had a divorce, Reese, and you tell us what to do. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, no. What kind of mediator was that? It was a different type. But I experience that almost daily, weekly, where folks say, I wish I'd known about you a year ago. And so I really believe generally people don't know about the services ombuds and mediators provide until they find themselves in need of those services, because we just don't think about it. I don't think about a mechanic until my car breaks down, or a heart surgeon, or whatever it might be. It's a specialist. And because that's what we are, we're specialists. I don't think people know about us. So I was not surprised when I saw Daniela's video, and they're going out asking students what's an ombuds, and they cannot pronounce it, and they're guessing, and there are always these funny, responses. But I think that's the reality, and maybe part of the challenge is how do we communicate the complexity, nuances, all the services, and that's why quite often I'll say, I'm like a coach, a conflict coach. I help you navigate. Last session, I think I mentioned the court jester metaphor, that look, my only authority, power really is to ask questions and tell stories, because that's how we create maybe change and look at things from a different perception. So years ago, I used to believe, I wish I could change the word ombuds and call us something else. And I think that's a huge undertaking. But
no, that's the direction we have to go, Reese. That's exactly the direction we have to go. Because finally, look, the concept for me is, of course, it is about the mediator and bringing in that part of it as organizational mediator available to people. So because the word mediator itself and what a mediator does, that's by itself, a lot of people in the world are not clear about. So you say mediation and they'll say arbitration. It just, most parts of the world, that's still happening. So first of all, to bring in a mediator and mediation into the process. And then you talk about a totally, different word. In terms of activities, we are still going to discuss what all is in a way common to the activity. But I'm just saying, bring in another word there, and then the whole thing just goes into a whole confused kind of thing. So no one even uses maybe any of the processes. So the idea is everyone should have work. First of all, for me, it's always been, how do we get mediators to get work? Because they have to they do this work full time. So another thing, Reese, we are going to discuss is that the whole concept of an outsourced ombuds. We'll talk about that also. But Melanie, your thoughts on this?
Yes, well, we're talking about the word ombuds. I mean, we do wear many hats as mediators. I think the name ombuds came from Swedish, literally meaning representative. If my research looks okay, when I've read back into that, I think you can go to ombudsassociation.org and find this data that they're mentioning. And it suggests the most fundamental level of an ombudsman is to assist individuals and groups. And we already know as a mediator, we do this. So ombuds, mediator, the goal is still listening, active listening, and hopefully bringing the conflict, those involved in these conflicts, whether it be organizational, individuals, whatever it is we're having to help with, to help them understand that there are lots of tools that we can use to help them think through the crises that they're trying to deal with, or just kind of advance in their own levels of thinking, how to understand how people think in the crises that you might see. What's the data look like for people in this situation versus in this other situation or in the court? You know, there's so many ways we could sit and just chat about it. So I'm happy to do it. We can just kind of pick one up and I'll go with it. But also in that same data I mentioned earlier on the association, some of us might be on that association, some of us aren't. Different types of ombuds, different roles, functional responsibilities and standards of practice might be identified in different roles. So we do need to, you know, the how is a standard of practice, right? And if there is a standard of practice, and if you want to function only as an ombuds, then this concept of a Swiss Army knife that has so many tools, then this leads me to believe that as we become a greater thinker, emotional experiential learning plays here. It tags into the last conversation that you talked to me about, Vikram. And it really does apply even in this conversation. We can just keep applying, and still advancing our thoughts and helping others work through some individual issues that they might experience, whether it be in the workplace, in the court systems, whether it be in organizational challenges or startups. You know, we can apply it in many ways. So,
because what we're going to do now is that let's look at it from everyone's perspective. Let's look at it from the ombuds itself. When you say Swiss Army knife, like you said, there's so many tools that can come out. So I just showed you those pictures. It could be 3 or it could be 50. I don't know how many, what the maximum are. So let's look at it from each part of, let's look at it from the board of the organization. What are they looking at? What do they think that Swiss Army knife is? And what about the user, the visitor, as you call them? What about them? And what the ombuds themselves look at? Let's just look at what all you think what tools that each of them expect and what do they get? So you want to break it up like that?
Yeah, no, I like that, because I do think it serves, you know, the function we provide, it serves different stakeholders and people in the organization. So I think for the organization, you know, one of the top 3, why have an ombuds office, I think is one, you know, it helps morale. You want people to be at that peak level of optimal performance, to be in the right mindset, to look forward to coming to work. Quite often, the folks I work with, I'll ask them, give me a number, 0 to 10, 7, 8, 9, job satisfaction. What level are you at? And it's no surprise when they say it's 5 or below, that quite often they'll mention what I call the Sunday evening blues or brownie feeling. It's that sense of we look at the clock on a Sunday and we're like, oh my gosh, I got to go to work tomorrow. I'm not looking forward to working with this person, or I don't enjoy this aspect. And we literally get, you know, in a more depressed, unproductive state. So I really believe ombuds help people shift their perspective and perception and recognize, okay, if you're at that 5, let's get to that 7 level. You know, a couple of notches above that, what's it going to take? So morale. I think it helps minimize litigation and the threat of lawsuits and the threat of people going externally, especially nowadays. If people are unhappy and they can't get some sort of clarity resolution internally, they'll go external. They'll write a petition. They'll create a blog post. They'll send a letter, so things are much more nowadays easier for folks to have that platform to vocalize their concerns. So I think that's one of the other elements for an organization. And three, I think it's just the right thing to do. Really, that should be number one. It's, we want people to manage conflict well. And I say this often and it's cheesy, but I'm like, if we don't manage conflict, we'll have a breakdown. But if we manage it, we can have a breakthrough. And that is good for the company, the institution, the organization.
Agreed.
But you have to do, from this, you have to still tell us about the tools, because each of them, what one is, of course, they should be there, and people are, whatever way it's avoiding a certain thing to escalate, yes. But specifically, I would really want to see, like you said, from the visitor perspective, the morale part of it and things like that.
Right.
But is it like when you have those magic, these magicians have those knives that you just press in and it just goes inside those spring knives? Is it that kind of Swiss Army knife, or it actually does work? Does it actually, that tool, is it useful for the visitor or not? How are they relating to it?
Right. Yeah. So I think for the what we call visitors, constituents, people that reach out. So for them, I think so often I'll hear from people say, it's just nice to be heard and respected and listened to. And it's so basic.
Yep.
Meaning you don't need a special degree to provide that space for people. You can be mindful as a facilitator, and there are specific techniques and strategies for really being in tune, being present, listening to people. But I think quite often we're stuck in a reality where, meaning in a business world or academic setting or work setting, where it's go, go, go. We have to do X, Y, Z. We only have so much time. And when people come in, I actually block 2-hour slots, because I don't want to be looking at the clock thinking, has it been, oh my gosh, it's 45 minutes, 48 minutes and running out of time. And so I give people that pace. And so I think one element of that Swiss Army knife, I think it's just really being there as an individual, as a human being, willing to listen and say, well, what's going on? You came in for a reason. What is it? What are you feeling? And sometimes people don't know. I remember years ago, someone came in the office and they're in tears. I'm like, are you okay? What happened? Are you physically okay? First of all, did you get hurt? No, I'm okay. It's like, okay, emotionally. What's going on? I don't know. I just don't feel good. I'm like, okay, let's grab a seat and talk about it. And they had a lot of things going on. And the more I listened, realized at some point that the person was turning, I believe, close to 30. I think they were turning 28. And their life did not match their expectations. And so they felt, in my career, I should be at this level. I'm not. I should be making this much. I'm not. And so there were a number of things. But being able to just chunk things down and say, well, let me listen. And, have you thought about this? And here are those resources. So that's another aspect is, there's the listening to people. And if people are open to it, then do you want to do something about it? You can think about it. We can continue that conversation in a week or two. It's up to you. Maybe you don't. Maybe they're quite happy, just reset. I just want to get it off my mind. By the way, neuroscience indicates PFC, prefrontal cortex, gets activated whenever we talk. And it doesn't matter who we're talking to. It could be your dog, your cat, your spouse, an Ombuds. It could be yourself. But it's actually activating a different part of the brain. And what's interesting about that is, like, right off the bat, when we vocalize our emotions, our feelings, our thoughts, we're relating to the conflict differently. So that's a huge, I think, value. But then two, and I don't want to, and I could talk probably the next 30 minutes, but I want to make sure Melanie jumps in. Once we say, well, if you want to do something about it, if you want to take action, things don't change till we take action and try something. Maybe here's a resource. We refer people to
Mhm.
Other resources out there, whether it's, employee assistance, the mental well-being, a conflict coaching, counseling for students. So there's that aspect.
Yeah,
But Melanie, I want to make sure you get an opportunity to jump
she's
in.
definitely good. But I'm thinking that Reese, that from your end, now you have put yourself into a funny position. You've put dogs, cats, spouses, and ombuds into one category.
One category.
Some
All
people are
equal.
not going to
Yeah.
like it so much. But
Right.
okay, so one is the organizational listener. Okay, so that's one part of that Swiss Army
Right.
knife. Of course, we'll come to that. The others there. Yes, Melanie, please. Where do you see yourself?
What was your question, Vikram?
No, I'm just thinking from what he said in terms of the listening part of it. That's something that he feels is, of course, an important part.
Oh, yes. As you might remember in our last chat, it's been a few weeks back in the last part of September, we talked extensively about using mindfulness as a tool. And then as we model that, the clients that we work with, they model it. They can. So it's a tool that we're offering them when they don't really have any other thought processes and they're just struggling with the conflicts of this young person that he was speaking of just a minute ago. Just really, first, the identity needed to be heard, valued, understood, felt accepted and warm and welcome to have this conversation. And then once you built the rapport, it sounds like you had something else to work with. And as you continue to have that conversation, it would advance. So I talk a lot about emotional intelligence, and I think this kind of picks up here. It's emotional intelligence is a tool that we can use when working with our clients who don't really know how to start a conversation that will help them advance in a bigger way to help them feel like they've got something that they can work with. So I don't want to bore Vikram on it. If you have any more questions, happy to mention it. Here's another book that I came up to. Well, I don't know if I'll be able to keep it in the video without it fading.
Reese has read that. Yeah, Reese has read that. He's read Who Moved My Cheese. Yeah.
Who Moved My Cheese? And so we probably all read it. It's a very easy read, but it's got some concepts that are kind of interesting, but it's probably applicable to somebody starting out and looking. What is your thoughts on it? Because you brought this book up and I know that you're not a reader. So
exactly.
What is your thoughts on it?
I don't know. Definitely. Look, it's one of those thinner books. So I did flip through it. I did at some point in time. But
the easy
just a flip through kind of thing. So it's, yeah. So you can tell us about it and how you want to link it here. Yeah, please.
Did you suggest that you picked through it and found something that caught your eye that you wouldn't want to speak on? I mean,
nothing. Look, I'm not going to be able to remember what it was, but I did flip through it, and it's many years back. It's many years back. This is quite an old book, so you don't ask me to remember. But I'm an illiterate person. Reese doesn't know that. Reese doesn't know that. Reese, I don't read books. They let him also hear that. So this is where she's just rubbing it in with me. That's why she's taken out a book. Look, I have the book. You have the Swiss Army knife. I have the book.
That's okay. See these books behind me? Half I've read, half I've not, and I've had them for decades. My goal is to get through them before my life is over. But that one I do know. I think it's Spencer Johnson, right, Melanie? Who Moved My Cheese? It is
Spencer Johnson, Who Moved My Cheese. Well, tell me what your thoughts are. Have you read anything on the book? It is, as Vikram says, it's a very easy, quick flip read. Basically, this Dr. Spencer it looked like a forward from Kenneth Blanchard. And I have to admit, I haven't read that portion of it, but I do tend to flip back. I think it's a tool that we can use for people who want to have something tangible that they can hold, read, flip through. If we really want to see a client that really, I mean, it's almost kind of acting like we're having to be a psychologist here, listening and kind of affirming their needs to be heard. Don't you feel like that sometimes as we're working with clients, or just like, how do we get here? What do we do? Well, we have to back up and piecemeal why, we'll peel it back. And then right now we have, if we want to use the court system as a thing, we don't really have that much time. Sometimes I've had to mediate a court case in minutes. I mean, we're looking at an hour, or you're going to have to go, clients are going to go back in there and go before the judge because the document's been read. I've offered to mediate with you, both parties not represented with attorneys. And then these clients, plaintiff and defendant, just can't work through the process of a mediation. So they're ready to have their fate decided by a judge. That's their right. As I said, here in America, it's just litigation. If that's what you want, it won't let you help control what's going to happen because facts are in court. Emotions get a little more play when you do mediate, don't you think? So there we are. So tools like this little book or other things can help us. Playing off of the Swiss Army knife theme, reading a book, listening. You're giving them eye contact if they need eye contact. You're giving them body affirmations. If they're leaning forward, then you kind of model that, give that to them so they feel like they can warm up. There are a lot of tools that you know, that we know, that we can use to help these clients. So what do you got on this, Reese?
Before that, Melanie, before that, I didn't ask you, how are you feeling? Are you all right now?
Oh, I'm sorry. You know, I did miss that last conversation I was supposed to be in because unfortunately I have been back in the hospital. But thank you for asking. I usually don't want to talk about it too much on a recording, but right now I'm fine. I'm connected at home, doing well.
Well, this is a problem that I have. I don't even know that it's going live somewhere. For me, this is my living room and I'm having a conversation. So I know there are certain things I ask which I should not be doing when it's being recorded and live. But I had to ask you because I didn't before you came in, and you came in after we had kind of started off. So yeah, okay, perfect. So you're feeling all right. That's all that matters. Yes, Reese.
Right now, I am. Thank you for asking.
Yes, Reese. Melanie wants to ask you, what do you feel?
Yeah, no, and you know, a lot of what Melanie just mentioned, I'm like, it resonates, echoes with me because one, even just this little interaction a minute ago about you asking, how are you doing? You know, and there being that acknowledgement and there a response and validates people, you know, quite often. I remember years ago when I was first in Ombuds, one of my, you know, I call them mentors, people that came before me, you know, one of her labels, identities, she would often, and it wasn't maybe so much her as much as people, but they would call her the ambassador of peace, because that's what she represented, was stability, being grounded. She would walk in the room and you better pay attention because words of wisdom are going to flow. And it wasn't a dictatorial, authoritative, I'm going to fix things. It was more of a, you're going through a lot and I'm here to help and be of service. And that always stuck with me because similarly, I think sometimes as ombuds, we're not the only ones, but it's a designated function. We're kind of like the compassionate face for the organization. That if anyone should be willing to listen and take time and really connect with you and be present. Now, it doesn't mean we'll agree with you, but we're there to understand the struggle you have and to really honor that. And again, it's not a place of judgment. It's, you know, I find it interesting when I get folks that maybe politically, you know, in the US right now, politics are a big topic, and it's one person that believes something that quote would be extreme, and then the other person comes in, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, maybe I've been doing something okay, because they're both willing to trust the process and the conversation and me, because they know I'm not here. And internally, I might be thinking, I don't know if I agree with that or this, but it's not about me in that moment. And so, again, being that compassionate face, right, Melanie?
Yes, I agree with you. And piggybacking onto this, practical to a conversation Vikram and I had pretty much about these things. September 26th, we recorded a talk on it. Maybe you could check it out, Reese, if you haven't seen it. But, you know, I do feel like we have a role here. We do need to, you know, well, Vikram just said, how are you doing? I do think it's an important question to ask our clients. Just check in, because if they're not comfortable, that you always want to let them know that, you know, kind of the structure that we can make them feel at home. If you need to, you know, kind of just introduce them to where the facility are, give them a warm drink, but greet them with a warm smile, a listening ear, and checking in on them, because if they're not present and their basic first needs are met, they're going to get angst, they're going to lean back, they're going to be crossing their arms, they're going to be kind of withdrawn, and it will extend that through the conversation and could probably have a negative impact on the work that we're trying to do, don't you think, Reese? So I do think, Vikram, when you ask that question, as I reflect back, I think it is important. How are you doing? Check in on you. Do you need anything? Allow them to have a break in the conversation. Allow them to get up and go stretch their legs and come back with a renewed mindset, deep breath. What else can we start with? And set some goals and an agenda. And, maybe it's not conquered in one conversation. And then you just set it and then you come back. But that's part of the process, Reese, is just giving the beginning, welcoming, and continue to help them feel welcome. That means we got to bring our A game, because we're the ones listening. And then we might be reading notes. And then we're not really sharing all the data if we have to convene separately in private caucuses. And that becomes more complex. It becomes more complex in many reasons, because they're wondering, what's the other one going to say? Are we going to get adequate time? What else is going to come of this? And they might be fearful of that process. So our jobs really do have to say, are you comfortable? What can we do? What else do I need to just listen to them talk about something else for a little bit and just start venting? Because if they're distracted, they've got something else on their mind, like a Swiss Army knife. We don't use it because it's stuff off in a pocket or in our drawer. Then we don't use our tools. Then we're not going to get what we need done, Reese, I think, and Vikram. So this Swiss Army theme of you taking advantage of all the tools that we've been trained to use, that we know instinctively, we understand how we can help them move. But these guests, our clients, may not. So
but we need to give names to those tools now. What we're doing is we're giving a name. So the listener tool, here we got one tool there. So what name do you want to give this tool?
Oh, there's so many. Listening, giving attention to. I think listening can be broke down complexities because it's body language. So I think our body language is a tool. Because in certain countries and certain postures, that's just a part of being attentive and listening, active listening. So we have to know our cultures that they're in and what is comfortable for our clients. And that tool, I think, could be attentiveness and involving culture in it.
Yeah, so something to do with Reese about the culture part of it. So I think you have to address that culture part of it, because that'll be interesting for you, because part of the university, I'm sure people from all over, I don't know how, I'm sure it's a very diverse kind of a student base. Mm-hmm. So culture must be one important aspect there. Yes, Reese, what do you say about the culture part?
So a couple thoughts popped into mind when Melanie was talking, and one I think is like that practice pointer Melanie highlighted about making sure we ask, individuals what else might be going on. It's a habit I've tried to develop. I'm not quite there yet, meaning I don't always ask, but I try to ask at the end of each session, setting this aside, how's everything else going here at Virginia Tech or whatever institution? That might add on another 30 minutes. Because it might be like, oh my gosh, Reese. Right? Because it might be like, oh my gosh, Reese, the kids, the dog, the spouse.
Yes, absolutely.
The other elements that might be contributing, impacting the conflict. It's not like I'm so tired because we just lost a team member, they moved on. And so you're like, oh my gosh, could that be impacting this situation? Absolutely. So asking.
Absolutely.
So I would say that tool, I would call that, if you open it up, the Ombuds as the, curious, inquisitive, holistic, what else is going on? And so specifically that holistic approach of, are your finances, your state, how you feel, your health, those aspects that, frankly, I might not be able to change their financial state, but I can say, you know what, there's a workshop these folks are offering, and because maybe what it means is they really need stability and certainty in their life because they don't have the finances. So now they're stressed because they just got dinged in the performance evaluation. So they are connected. So I would say the Ombuds, the tool is as maybe that holistic approach. You know, and then two, I love questions because it helps us maybe reframe the issue sometimes. And I know it's a balance, meaning I don't have an agenda in that I want people to end up here when maybe they don't need to. They decide where do they want to go, and if anywhere. But I do think there's value in reframing issues so that if sometimes someone is upset because the system is set up in a specific way, and it's like, absolutely, it sounds unfair, doesn't make it right. And, you know, I have kind of a internal mantra I tell myself, which is the issue, the question someone approached my office about isn't really the real question. There's a deeper question behind that, below that. So it might be someone's upset at their performance evaluation, and it might be that evaluation is not going to change because maybe they don't, you know, get modified. But maybe the real question for that person is, how do they feel empowered and valued and respected and acknowledged and recognized? And maybe that's the real question. So slightly different tool, I would say, still related to questions, but there the focus is on reframing.
I agree.
Maybe the issue.
May I bring up a topic? Have you thought about an igloo? What we can see, most people understand the story about the Titanic, right? We also know the stories of global warming and these ice caps are melting. But if you look at an igloo, there's some psychology behind it, because the igloo at the top above the water is what you see. But when you're talking about these conflicts that you're talking about, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Well, where you bring up all of these things that are under the surface, and until you allow an acknowledgement of what is it that's behind the scenes. So I'll use this analogy. I was working with some clients in a hospital setting. There were some grievances, and I was asked to come in here, kind of help them talk through it. So basically facilitation. And you talked about sometimes you have to facilitate. But really all that needed to be heard is what was happening to this person before they came to work, or what is it's on their mind while they're at work, because they're about to face something when they're leaving work. I call it kind of an igloo effect, because there's so much more. We see what the people bring to the table, what they were been employed to do, but emotionally they're somewhere else. They're struggling because the things underneath the surface. So that igloo, the top part of the surface, it's what we don't see that tends to be a lot of emotions, we'll just say, underneath the surface that are dealt with. You know, you think about, how many kids do they have? What do they have to do? Or is a spouse, or is there trouble in the life of the marriage, or taking care of an elderly family member, or a very sick child themselves? So that could be one piece. This is what's always going to be on their plate. It's going to be long term. But as an employee or a facilitator, a conflict management in this crisis, I had to help them think back. All right, there's resources we can offer you. So again, if we go back to the Swiss Army knife idea, we can maybe name another tool, just not employee relations, but maybe reflection. And it owned up that this particular case we settled with just after one person that had the other conflict, and they were so angry because it was the way the person was talking to them, but they didn't realize all the stress that was going on before or after in this person's life. And it just brought so much drama to the workplace. And we've talked about many workplace struggles. It's probably a common thing that you've dealt with, or some of us have. Once they saw it with that different lens of the mindfulness, like, what is it this person's experiencing? And then empathy came into play. I mean, you could give a tool of empathy. it changed their relationship in the workplace. They became more respectful because they're like, there's a lot going on. And all of us do. If you're a young mom or young dad, you've got to make sure the bills are paid. Right now with the COVID pandemic or the other crises of the world, like Ukraine, others, Russia, everybody's experiencing something. And it often does affect in the workplace environment because we don't listen to what their needs might be. They might need a 5-minute just a cool down break. Just let them step away from it a minute and come back and bring, a good hard another 1 hour of attentiveness and then go take that break if you need it. Let's have your best self and then give them like employee relation tools, other things that we can do to kind of help these organizations in crises deal with something. And it really can be as much as let's let you step away. Let's let you have time to think a minute. Just deep breathe, sit for a second, have a little sip of water. It really does bring back. It's like having a talk, and every 10 minutes we stop, distract, and go back to it, and we engage again. And it just helps refresh their mind and their ability to function in their role. What do you think about that?
Reese, from the tip of the iceberg thing, what is in terms of your aspect of how much do you have to dig deeper? So the digging deep tool that you were looking at, of course, that's what Melanie is bringing out.
It's kind of like an emotional shovel.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That shovel kind of thing. We're looking at a Swiss Army knife with a shovel
yes.
on it.
Put that shovel
on there.
But
Reese, yeah. I think it's about sometimes helping people remind themselves those connections we have, because we're all the same in the reality that we're human and we're having a human experience. And so that binds all of us, no matter where we're from, ages or cultures and localities. As Melanie was talking, it reminded me of this mediation facilitation years ago that was going in circles. It was a workplace dispute between what I'll call Jack and Diane, two individuals, and it was going nowhere. They were pointing fingers, mad at each other because the other person wasn't doing what they wanted the other person to do. And it wasn't until, and I forget how, but the question came up, I think it was around, what's causing stress in your life outside the workplace? And unbeknownst to each other, both of the individuals had autistic children. And once one person shared that and said, I'm just really stressed out, and they were almost in tears because my so-and-so son and that heartache and just the responsibility changed the dynamic, because the other person could say that I can relate to and I understand and now can see things from your perspective, because it was something they could relate to. And so that's the beauty, I think, of a lot of work we do as mediators and ombuds. Not everybody, because I know some ombuds, mediators too. It's the rights versus relationship dichotomy, meaning sometimes people, what they need is they want justice because they feel their rights have been encroached, violated, transgressions, and rightly so. Maybe they need to sue or go through a formal process. It's not negotiable. And for other people, it's about relationships. It's about, Reese, this person and I used to get along, and then I don't know what happened. Or I said something, I misspoke or misstated something, or vice versa. And so how do we repair that relationship? And either one really, I think, goes back to that ability to look below the surface and find out, well, what connects these people? What is going to give them that peace of mind?
And I think awareness is what comes to mind as I listen to your story. These things, I've done cases like this many, many times. And it really is that awe moment when they're like, it's not just about showing up to work and doing a task. We're doing it some full-time every day. And it is almost exhausting to be in a dispute at work and never feel, having employment retention scores stay stable is really what an employer is at. And this tool of let's just have a conversation privately with them and let's see what common things can come to this table, because they just need a moment. You might be aware, a manager's aware of crises maybe on both sides, but these people in conflict, they're probably not. And an example, the nurses eat their young kind of thing was something that was a real deal years ago. And they're not having good conversations. They're feeling like they're having to fight for their authorities in the workplace, I suppose, because you've got charge nurses and it's so much responsibility on it. Then you've got very capable nurses that want to work independently and don't want to be micromanaged. But if that charge nurse is a micromanager, it's just like choking and making them, it just sucks the life out of the work environment. So it really is a line where we say, what kind of tools can we bring to the table? An awareness of others, what others are feeling, what others are doing, what good things. We bring good points in, and then we work on some things. We set up an agenda. We bring calm, listening, attentive, physical, safe environment as a holistic approach, as I think you mentioned, Reese. Two, you both have value. We know that you're stressed. Let's see what else. And so that igloo, once they start to reveal to themselves and to each other things about the other and what's happening, such if it is autistic children, or if it's a marriage in crisis or financial woes, even a small thing like an inexpensive vehicle transporting themselves to and from work can bring in and of itself massive stress. And the gas cost, it's economics speaks loud. And we have programs for a lot of hospitals and hospital business that try to support small things. But overall, now with this tridemic, we've got COVID, influenza, and RSV. So every work environment, they might have a child or a family member with any of those three. And that gives a greater complexity and awareness that we need to use as tools, as awareness as we need to teach the managers that invite us in these conversations, organizational managers, CEOs inviting us to the table to say, help me find what's going on here. I'll start out with giving them positive things that I can see, and then we start working on the nitty-gritties. But that openness, the comfort, let's have a cup of coffee, let's take a little break, let's hear from you. Share something to tell us, help us understand where you're at, and if there's something that we can do. And empathy comes in, and then a connection is made. It's restorative relationships. It's a powerful tool, and how a meeting, a facilitation, ombuds might advance in the crises, don't you think?
Yeah, but I think Reese, what you brought out was that you were kind of touching on that, but there was this whole concept of mediation. There is one transactional kind of concept of mediation which goes around a lot, and one is the other aspect, which I had one symposium on: heart, soul, spirituality, and mediation. And that's the kind of thing that I'm looking at, and in that, the aspect that you're trying to bring out, I'm just putting it out here. This is how I look at this, and from here, the tools that you are looking at in relation to connecting them on a different level, that kind of a thing that some people can bring in. So we have to also look at this humanistic approach, that bringing this in, connecting the people at a different level altogether, to bring in that aspect. So I think that's something that you were kind of touching on. I don't know whether, how you were looking at that. You want to maybe expand on that a little bit, Reese?
Yeah, so quite often in working with folks, individuals, or especially teams, I'll acknowledge, it'd be great if we could sit around the campfire, have hot chocolate, eat s'mores, and sing Kumbaya.
I was thinking that same thing.
And acknowledge the spirituality, the human connection. I've seen it happen, and it's not a place some people want to go. Meaning, some folks, I remember doing a session years ago, and it was a small enough group. I'm like, oh, who are you? Give me your name, what you do, and something you're passionate about, whatever it might be, outside of work, books, gardening, and one person was so uncomfortable sharing what they were passionate about. And at first I thought they were joking, because they're like, Reese, there is work and there's personal life. And they once I walk through these doors, that part of me stays out there. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't say this, but I feel sad for you, because who you are is where you go, and that's what you bring, and that's got to impact. But they wanted to keep it separate. And actually, if I remember correctly, I do now, later on, I learned that this individual, they had a spouse that was going through an ordeal. They had cancer. And part of me, I'm like, I can respect, understand that, and how lonely it must have been for that individual in the workplace, not being able to explain to people, because they had put these walls that, I'm upset or tight or not expressive because, here's where it's at, the diagnosis. So I acknowledge, if we could go to that kumbaya moment, that would be wonderful. For now, let's take a step back. Can we just get along? Can I just do my job, you do your job? And how do we treat each other respectfully and start at that level? I think it was Ken Cloak who I noticed was going to be your keynote. And I think one of the next conversations, they were going to wrap up the session. And, he was one of the first folks I saw. I think he drew a little triangle, and he talked about, you can talk about respect, and like the igloo, the deeper you go, you can talk more about the really kind of the human connection, that humanism. So that resonates with me, because I'm always mindful of, like, wherever we go, there we are. I know some people don't want to go there. And frankly, I used to mediate years ago for one of the superior courts in California. And I remember being like in my early 20s and being petrified, because these attorneys were twice my age easily, and they were arguing over how many millions should this person get or not get. And I remember thinking, I'm out of my league. But looking back, those actually were a lot easier than the relational type mediations, because there it's a number. It's how much do you want to give? 1.3? How much do you want? 500,000? There's a gap of about 800,000. That in 30 minutes, it was resolved, because we did the whole dance and it settled. That was easy, versus I'm upset because you betrayed my trust. You did something and you went behind my back. I'm sorry, I lost the question. What was the question?
There's no questions, Reese. You can take it anywhere you want. There is no
moment. Yeah.
It's good. I think this is the way it has to happen. Take it wherever. But I was just trying to say that aspect that you brought the whole concept of connecting at a different level. Is that but you're saying whether that should actually come out or not. Some people don't want that tool to come out. So that's what I'm saying. So looking at it from different perspectives, one from the visitor perspective, some of them don't want that tool, but from the Ombuds, here we're talking about the Ombuds. Of course, I'm not getting the mediator in, but from the Ombuds perspective, you have all these tools with you. Or do you not have these tools with you? Because there is the whole concept of mediation, like I said, where these tools are not part of it. It is about, like you said, this much money I want to pay, this much is what this person wants. Let's find a way to get them onto a certain figure. So that's another concept of mediation. In that mediation, are they really looking at heart, soul, spirituality coming out? Maybe not. So, and for me, that's the reason. That's the reason maybe I feel that mediation did not take off the way it should have, because that transactional thing is not something that you enjoy that process. Each one is going to look at it from the perspective, I had to compromise for so and so reason, because the cost of litigation is so much, because the time would be so much, so I settled at that amount. So it wasn't really a good experience you came out with. So you're not going to push the process. It's going to be something in a way you were forced to do. So, but if you bring out this entire concept of being a heart, soul, spirituality, that's one part of it, the humanistic approach and all that, then you come out as a happier out of that. And once you come out happy with something, then you talk about it. And similar aspect on the Ombuds thing also, we would maybe look at a kind of a, I mean, I don't know whether it's going to be the same thing, but in that space, what is the experience that a person has? I mean, you would know from your visitors that experience that they had from it, and what did they take back and what did they take forward to other people? Did you get some feedback on that?
Yeah. So I think it's that, evolution. And as you're talking, I love stories, and I won't go into the whole story, but there's a wonderful Zen story about how this little old lady reminds us that, we're always offering a gift in the emotions we give to people and our interactions. And we always have the ability to say, no, I don't want this gift. And I think as ombuds and mediators, facilitators, peacemakers, we're always offering like, well, what do you think about this? Or here's this option. And again, if I feel like my responsibility is to put that gift out there and say, hey, do you want to talk about this? Because this might be where maybe the conversation needs to go. But the person can say, nope, I don't feel comfortable. I don't see the value, the necessity. And sometimes some of the best change that happens, I think, in people is not in the conversations so much as the aftermath, what happens next. And I think that's us as almost like planting these little seeds that maybe will not grow. Because after any conversation, most of the time people might say, I feel a little better. That made me feel good. That was inspirational, motivational. I'm like, great, your state changed. But that's only in the moment. Now, if the actual conflict is going to change, I really believe you've got to take action. You got to decide. You got to let go of things, your expectations, modify your approach, your perception, how you communicate, your habits. And that's work that happens outside that space. But I do have folks that really come back maybe 2-3 weeks later and say, you said something in that conversation and made me stop and think that maybe I'm the problem. Never thought about that. Or that maybe I'm contributing somehow. And you know what? My colleague mentioned that a year ago, and my spouse mentioned it. So maybe I should reflect on that. Do you have some books on this topic, or is there a workshop? And so there, that is that, again, what I call that evolution. It's that being reflective, being mindful about, okay, how, and we're all on that journey. I'm not any better than anyone. The moment I think I am, I get knocked down by life that reminds me, hey, Reese, you're not that good. So that's why I love the Who Moved My Cheese, going back to Melanie's book that she offered a little while ago. And it's a classic. It's like almost like a children's story, because it has, I think, 2 or 3 little
big stories. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's hem and haw, and there's a piece of cheese that gets moved, but the lessons are about change and how change is going to happen, whether you like it or not. Think COVID. We had to change our behaviors, our actions, how we interacted in life, in the workplace. And a belief I have is anytime we solve problems, we get a new batch of problems. Like with COVID, it's like, oh, we can telecommute. That sounds great. Everyone have access and the right equipment and the tools and the connectivity, and how do we hold each other accountable and productive and adapt our hours so we have a new set of problems. And so I think that's the part of the evolution of change. One is being responsive to it, but also I think anticipating the next set of problems.
So in terms of the tool, Reese, the one tool that you're saying is about opening that little hole in the person's mind so that they can suddenly, a window you've opened. Let's not look at the whole, some windows, or the person has some other perspective that they start looking at, something that on that.
It's, the ombuds as agent of reality, maybe, or holding that mirror up to people and saying, again, and it's sensitive because people don't want to feel like they're being attacked, but it's offering that. And I tell them, I've got a belief. My belief is everybody, we're all contributing to a conflict. Even if we don't say anything, we're contributing. We're being passive. We're see it. We don't intervene. We're the bystander that's not speaking up. or we keep doing the same thing. And so with that in mind, how do you think you're contributing to the situation in any way, and planting that seed? So even if they feel like, oh, Reese, no, I'm doing everything absolutely right, then maybe the question still will linger with them, So absolutely, I think Ombuds as kind of magic mirror, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
But one thing that you mentioned about Ken Cloak. So on the website, you can
Yeah.
actually go. There's a
That's
section. It's a section
Yeah.
called Celebrating Ken Cloak. But he's been on various of my shows and events. I call him. I tell him that you're the face of the dispute resolution revolution. So we started this evolution of a mediator. I started with him only for the fact that so much of a person experiences and how they grow up and everything makes them the mediator they are, not being made in a 40-hour factory. So this is what. So you have a lot of these things. He's various events. He's been the inaugural speaker or keynote speaker or closing speaker. So please have a look at them. Interesting. So all the YouTube links are there, so you can go directly from here. So, but on the cultural part, no, you haven't touched that part. On the cultural diversity and handling that part of it, both of you have to touch on those as that aspect also.
Yeah.
Yes, Reese, are you going to go first? Melanie,
Yeah,
who's going to go
I'll
first?
jump in. So,
please.
no, and that's a huge, I also like acronyms. I've got one, CAPS, CAPS. And I'm like, those are some of the factors, not the only ones that impact communication and conflict. And the first one is C, which is culture. Now, what's culture? For me, the definition is it's the unspoken. It's what you and I and everyone else in an immediate environment knows, but we just don't talk about it because it's just known. And so every place has a culture. It could be, in a specific company, you don't, talk about your personal life. You don't, question authority or upper leadership. And so it's the unspoken, or if you broaden it, then it could be the, generally in a country, maybe, again, I'm one of 350 million Americans, but generally the US has an image reputation for being very independent as individuals. Or we'd like to achieve things on our own, and we like the success story, the overnight, the person that on their own, they defeated all odds, the Rocky story, the Chris Gardner, homeless to, multi-billionaire, millionaire. And that resonates with us, but that framework doesn't always align with someone that might say, well, where I come from, it's about the team and the collective, and maybe other countries. And so you see that in the workplace where maybe there's that tension of, we just don't do it that way here. And other folks might disagree and say, well, last place I came from. I'll give an example that I see here at Virginia Tech, which in this part of Virginia, we're in the South. And generally, I don't want to stereotype people, generally there's a perception that folks are not very direct with conflict. They're indirect. They'll hint at it, they'll say things, and you're supposed to get the message. I've met other folks from the Northeast, self-identified folks from the Northeast that'll say, why can't people just communicate directly and say, I've got a problem with that? And so they sometimes here in the workplace, they've moved here and they say how frustrated they are because they have a different set of guidelines, expectations. So to me, that's part of culture, the culture they grew up with, the expectations, the guidelines. There's the more, regional culture we all grew up with, for example, in some Latin American countries, for example, the nicknames we come up with, again, not a stereotype, a generalization, is we look at people and whatever stands out about them, we highlight. So it might be, hey, there's so-and-so, the one with the red hair. So, hey, Carrot Top, might be their nickname. And that's the intent, and the impact might be different, but it's kind of the norm. Now, that might not be appropriate when that person goes to a company where it's like, hey, Shorty, hey, Carrot Top, hey, one-eyed because you're missing an eye, it becomes offensive. And so I always, go back to, what are those frames we bring, and in the immediate environment, how is it going to be received? Because it might not resonate. And I hope I'm communicating that correctly. Just being mindful, thoughtful of, the impact our words might have on those around us, because they might come from a whole different culture.
But where does Reese come from? Reese is is that a nickname or yeah?
Yeah, no, good question. Started in college. So Mauricio is my name, but a number of folks could not pronounce it. It was Mauricio. No lie, I got marsupial one time. And I'm like, really? That's that little wallaby thing that jumps out of Australia? And back then I had a girlfriend, and she would call me, Recio. And then a lot of folks started calling me Recio. So then she went to Reese, Reese. And so I had tried a different number of like Morris, and I would tell people like, the cat, there were these commercials with Morris the cat. I'm like, because it made it easier for people. It's like Jack, Diane, John, Morris. So Reese, that was the origin of Reese. Decades ago in the 90s, and it kind of just stuck with me. And
how does that make you feel?
What's
that make you? I was just doing the how. How does that make you feel that your full name isn't? I mean, does it take away from what you identify with? Do you miss that? How did it make you feel? And if this was a topic for some people in the workplace, how would you address it? Right? I've got some ideas, but I do want to check in. How do you feel and resonate with that name that you're reduced to?
Yeah, no, and for me, and this is just speaking for myself, I loved it. I still do.
Okay.
Yeah. He uses it. He puts it himself.
It was short. It was effective. It was more, even though now I might say it's Reese, and people might say Grease. I'm like, no, come on, that's the movie, and and so they might mishear it or might mispronounce it or something, but. For me, Melanie, I'd say I don't feel like I lost.
You think it helps become more relatable, more approachable? I think I see that it could, and it puts you in a position of a linguistic dialogue that there's no barrier. So I think that's a positive approach for you.
For me, it is, and though I will acknowledge, what works for me might not work for everybody. Because someone might say, this name I have is sacred, and it's my parental given name, or my, and so the meaning for them might be different, and I think it's a choice for folks that they have to, take on, acknowledge what their identity or the name that they prefer, and I think that's. One of the things about us human beings, it's like, oh, you can even be a symbol nowadays. We have some artists that prefer to go by a symbol or just an initial, and I'm like, more power to them if it helps them communicate their message, their identity, who they are, makes them maybe more memorable,
And Melanie's taken my name into a different direction, and I'm okay with it. She's made it Vikram. So that's what you made it. Yeah, she's made it Vikram. So it's okay. It all sounds nice.
How would you like it said?
I'm okay with anything. The way it's pronounced here is Vikram.
Vikram.
Yeah, that's the way it's pronounced here, but I'm okay with it. I'm okay with Vikram. So it's perfectly all right with me.
Vikram is fine. Yeah. I get Frizzle and Frizzell. The reason there's a difference there is Frizzle on a TV show. Frizzle was the magic school bus teacher. So I get Frizzle a lot, especially if I'm in a speaking or a teaching environment. I get Frizzle, and then Frizzell, or I get Frizzell, which is what we relate to. But either way, you just become, I kind of giggle with where their mind goes when they're thinking about the magic school bus, but it kind of breaks down a barrier and we just kind of move on. Thank you for your patience, because internationally, our understandings of how we might pronunciate something, we don't want to be hurtful to our clients. I certainly wouldn't mind being, hey, I like Vikram versus Vikram. I want to respect and do that. We just never had that conversation, but I do appreciate that you've shared that. And Reese, I think your story is really cool because you've advanced to being in a relatable and it's comfortable for you. And that's great. As I was being the teacher mode, Frizzle was a great way to bring them in because their mind was going to go there with that cartoon until they could get past it. So it was an approachable thing. It was a relatable thing. So it happens. So I have something else to bring on as an idea of some tool that we use. A lot of times, is it okay for me to say?
Please.
I don't know if you guys use this, but I use Venn diagrams because you can map out a conflict. And if people don't have the words, but they're maybe a visual person, then other people that have words so you circle a conflict in the center and then offshoot from that in a Venn diagram and then see how they overlap. That's where I use a tool that if they don't want to say the words and talk about it, but other people want to share it. And so we started putting a visual up on the wall. It starts changing things. People perspectives start changing them. And it really doesn't matter what kind of conflict, or if you're an organizational thing, you're in an individual conversation, or you're just dealing with something at school for a student, or maybe their parents, or maybe employees that are dealing with whatever. It works. And it is an option to not be linguistic, but to just see it in a visual form, map it out, and then break down. If you say, well, that's a lot, so let's just take a fractal, so that would just be a little bitty piece that might overlap in a diagram. Let's work on that. If this matters to you and this matters to you, let's work on this piece. And then as that moment comes on, they've got that visual and they'll end up taking pictures of it, reflect on it, come back the next day or wherever we meet again. I've found that to be a good tool. So it's another option.
So I think what's interesting, why this discussion was interesting, was because Melanie is bringing out what tools a mediator or a ombuds can use. And on the other end, we are trying to see ombuds, what tool are they? What tool are they and not what they use? So I think that's why the conversation is interesting. Because here I'm trying to say, what are they? I mean, like he said, the listener is the tool, or the digging deeper tool. So I think we also need to, maybe tomorrow when we go through it, maybe look at that as them, the tool, and not the tool that they use. I think so we'll have to make a distinction. So which is what I think we'll maybe clarify in the beginnings, to say that let's look at them as the tool for sure. But let me tell you, Reese, she said TV show, Shark Tank, the new season has started. I just saw the first one today.
Oh, nice.
And they've made it live. Now it's a live audience there. It's a very different format. I don't know how these sharks are looking at it, because I saw they were a little more subdued. They were not the way they were, because when you have a live audience, maybe you just need to be more polite or whatever. So it's an interesting format. Because Melanie, because last time Reese said he was talking about Shark Tank being the popular show there. So I was telling him
I watched it.
Yeah. So I was saying I'm waiting for the next season. So I just saw the first episode today. So that's why I was telling him.
It's not always polite. Sometimes it's pretty harsh.
No, that's why I'm saying that this whole they made this now into a live thing. So they have a live audience there. So it seems, because this was the first episode, so maybe because they're not, I mean, when you have so many people sitting there watching you, look, right now we are talking and we don't know who's watching us. So it's a different thing. And if supposing there were these 1,000 people sitting there looking at you, would you be the same person or not? I don't know. So for them, I can see the difference. I can see the difference in the way they're going about it. That's the first episode. I don't know what's going to happen later.
Who's on the shark panel though?
Same guys.
Is this still Mr. Wonderful?
Yeah. Same.
Same ones. Okay, well, it'd be interesting because I like to look at behaviors as they're sitting here negotiating sometimes ridiculous contracts and setting these clients up with great ideas to give up a lot of money to do.
No, but the difference is that earlier, obviously, only the sharks are there, and of course, there's a deal on the table. Here, there's an audience shouting out, "Take the deal! Take the deal!" So, I mean, so many people sitting
like
there.
Price is Right, kind of.
Yeah,
hey,
exactly. So, can you imagine the pressure on this person whose life is going to change? Here, there's pressure on them to do something, and then I don't think, how much can you think in that kind of a situation? Someone's telling you, pushing it through.
I don't
So it's
know
interesting. It's a different concept, totally.
but they come in, they have to be just flat of fact and make just such a presentations over the top, and they have to muzzle, tone out all the noise that's going on while they're being distracted, because the presentation is everything. So they're practicing hardcore. I would envision that it's going to be that way, but yeah, I can see how Shark Tank's going to make a little extra money with some shooting live and getting people
No,
in
and
there.
what they've done is, in terms of making the money, so in between, the shark will ask the audience, what do you think of this? So now they have a little, I mean, in terms of options of answers, and they'll ask you to SMS the answer because it's going live. So they're making money on that SMS also. So they found their ways to make money.
Yes, they have. Sounds like it. Interesting. Thank you for bringing that up, Vikram.
So, well, I didn't finish it. The last one I have to watch, the last person who came in for this first episode. But it's interesting to see the whole format changing, and why they would change it, I don't know. I thought it was popular enough with the existing format. What must have come through their mind? What do you think, Reese? Why would they have done that?
Yeah, I don't know. Then try something new and see what the result is. Maybe you'll get more viewers and
Do you think the ratings were falling? I don't know.
Possibly, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think it's that stickiness, right? The eyes, they want more eyeballs, and that as Melanie was talking, I'm like, these are great lessons in Shark Tank. Like, it's like the athlete. I'm like, okay, I don't like sports. I don't know who won what game, baseball, football, and rugby, but I'm always fascinated by the individual stories and the triumphs. And also one aspect about how, like, athletes, they're performing and they've got a stadium full of 30,000 people shouting, maybe even saying, I'm going to kill you and do these things. And I'm like, and yet they're able to perform and do their best and throw that ball or catch that ball or do something. And just like Shark Tank, it's like, you've got people saying, take the deal. And we want to react and think, oh my gosh, everyone says or sounds like, so am I stupid for not doing this? And I think there's some lessons, right, when it comes to conflict, because one of the things we don't often talk about when it comes to conflict is the influence of people around us. And people know we're in conflict sometimes, not always, but and so they've got, there's someone egging us on and saying, this is not fair. You should go do something about it. Go talk to the boss. And so they're pushing us. And so there's that societal pressure, and we're social creatures. We do what other people are doing. If everyone's running out the door, say in a movie theater or in a stadium, we're going to be like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to start running too, because maybe they know something I don't. And when it comes to
are you familiar with a time where researchers would get one person to stand and make a line in a mall having nothing to do, but people will start joining in line because they think they might miss out on something, and there's nothing that they're standing in line for. But the psychology of that, I know if you look that up, you'll find it, but I find it interesting that we're creatures of habits, and we're creatures of curiosity. We're creatures of pleasure and seeing. So if you go back to the Shark Tank, the sharks have some advantages here with the audience pushing and distracting of people who are really trying to think of another ridiculous offer that they can get, so they can negotiate and keep something they find valuable. And it is valuable to them, but sometimes the products aren't very good and they don't need to be support. They won't advance, and there's knowledge in this. But Vikram, I'm going to have to pay attention to this show, because I do think I negotiate stuff as well and business concepts, and I'm sitting here thinking, oh, this could be just a disaster for these people. They hurry up and just feel pressure to take something they shouldn't do.
Yeah. That's what I saw in one of these. I mean, the one I was watching, one of them, I could understand that there was too much pressure on them. I mean, here you're changing your life kind of thing. That 2% can make all the difference if you look at it over some years, what the valuation could be. And you have to take that, you're taking that deal with so many people shouting on at you. But the good part that came out from that was that because of this little poll that they were taking, they were actually being able to find out about a product which otherwise they had no idea what this product can do. Digging a kid's nose. This is that little tool that someone had developed. I mean, children up to say about 2 years, they say can't really dig their own nose. So it came out with a tool. Now someone comes out with this new product to you, don't even know. So a little poll, what do you think? And everyone said, yes, this is something which is useful. So it works both ways, and I mean, it was interesting. So it's a new format, new way of looking at it. But I think both I found that to be useful to a certain extent. But otherwise, you'll put down an idea, okay, and supposing it's coming from someone who hasn't really got any sales. In this case, they had lots of sales. So in this particular tool that this person had developed, but otherwise, if there was no sale, you would have just put that idea down. I said, no, do people really need it? So at least some kind of feedback you're getting right there. So interesting.
Right. Yeah. No, oh my gosh, I'm like, even though it seems like we're off topic, to me, I'm like, these insights apply to conflict and communication. And Melanie, as you were talking, yes, those studies with, I think it was Robert Cialdini wrote a couple, 3 decades maybe now, a book called the Power of Influence, I think, and talk about social proof that quite often what we need to be influenced or influence others is that validation that, hey, others are buying this. Oh my gosh, I remember buying my first suit when I was in graduate school, law school, and I went to this one shop, and the guy's like, do you want it the trousers hemmed this way or this way? And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, everyone right now in law firms, they're doing it this way. And I'm like, oh, really? Because I kind of like that way. It's like, well, do you want to fit in? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, okay, then you should do it this way. And then that's because everybody supposedly had it hemmed, whatever, the trousers in a specific way. And so just like getting in line, so there's that social validation. But, Vikram, as you're talking, it just reminds me how what works for one individual might not work for another, because they, it might seem like, oh my gosh, you're giving this away. And story that comes to mind is Sylvester Stallone, Rocky, back in the 70s, when he went around back to the same studio saying, I've got this script, and people saying, that's a really good script, we want to buy it. And basically he was penniless. He had sold his, true story, you can Google it, had sold his dog to survive. And they were offering him, I think, like 100,000. He's like, nope, because I want to play Rocky. And I will give you 150,000. I think it went up to like 300,000. And in the end, Sylvester Stallone's like, you don't understand. I need to play this character. I am this character. It was his story. And finally, the studio said, you know what? We'll give you something like 30,000 if you're going to be in it, because it's going to flop. They don't know who you are. Look at you. People can't even understand you. Look at the way you look. You're not an actor. And the rest is history. But how many of us would have turned down being basically almost homeless, penniless, that amount of money?
Well, it sounds like he had a vision, and he placed value on it, and he didn't let it go. I mean, he's still making movies from his original concept. And I watched them all in the 70s and the 80s when they probably started. Yes, everybody can relate to a theme song that pumps them up, it gets them moving. A lot of sports teams play some of it and try to get in that groove. It's a relatable thing. It empowers them. They feel like it's a story that maybe many of them can resonate with, and that's, he stuck to his guns on. I'm glad.
I mean, one example these days, I don't know whether you've seen that there's an app called Canva for designing. So that's used for designing. Basically, this woman went all around. I mean, everyone rejected that proposal of hers to invest in it. Still stuck to it, and finally, she's made a $40 billion company. And just by sticking to things, I have to do this. And I think about 100 venture capitalists rejected her. No one was more willing to invest in it. So I think once you just have that faith in yourself, you keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, the power of conviction, perseverance, and the reminder that what works for one person might not be what works for somebody, and someone might be better off saying, okay, maybe I won't pursue this, or I'll let this go and let it be. And again, as Ombuds, it's like, I don't know. If I really knew what would serve you the best, I would tell you. Why wouldn't I? If I knew things were going to change if you do X, Y, Z, I would, like a doctor, I would prescribe and say, go do this. But I don't know. All I know is, try one thing. If it doesn't work, try something else. And if you have that burning, relentless question of like, how can I make this work? How can I fix this? How can I make things better? Then maybe with the right strategy, you'll get there.
Okay. So this tool is that I don't have the solution tool. I am
right.
So I'm not here to give you that thing. So you have to take it where you. But I think what hasn't come out today is the aspect of the actual dispute resolution, as in what a mediator would do. Are we looking at that part? Because here we've spoken about a lot of other things, but we haven't really reached a dispute resolution or conflict resolution, as you would call it. For me, it's dispute resolution is what I'm focusing on. So I think that part of it, Reese, you haven't maybe spoken about it today. But are you coming in tomorrow?
I should be tomorrow, yes.
So can we move a little bit to that direction also?
Tomorrow,
The
yeah.
actual resolution, one is within the person. So we've spoken a lot about helping that person resolve it within themselves, maybe. But actually, there is another person on the other end, and to be able to resolve it with them, that part hasn't been touched.
Right.
You think? Yes, Melanie? We haven't touched that part in relation to the ombuds?
I would agree. There's always functions that we're not covering right now that ombuds can do. So it's true.
Well,
I won't be able to join you live tomorrow. I've got
any thoughts? Yeah, any thoughts you want to leave with us so that Reese can take it up there? Anything that you would want discussed?
I think if we wanted to just bring people to light, understanding what ombuds can and can't do, the functionalities, and relate it to a Swiss Army knife tools, I think there's a few topics of what can the ombuds do in real life? How do you put it to what a name or a tool at Swiss Army knife might be, and then explain what that could look like for the layperson who doesn't understand these terms. But we know as ombuds, you're looking at individuals and you're instructing them to work through a process. And I think that maybe that's something that this could bring to light, is a little bit more information on what a role ombuds can do and how individuals could use it more.
Okay, so and understand. Yeah. So what you have to do is put names to those tools which people could understand on an easy basis what they would relate to. I think we need to do that. The other is the actual resolution of it, not just by dealing with one individual only, but bringing in the other person also into the picture, and how ombuds look at that. Because like I said, for me, it is about finally, can mediators be doing this as we call them mediators, or is an ombuds a totally different aspect of it, which, like I said, whether the twain will meet or not meet, or where they're going to meet. So I mean, these are just thoughts out there. Is you will take this up. So I think I don't know where it's going to go, but I think we need to maybe focus on these aspects. Yes.
The only other one more thing is the advantages and disadvantages of roles that ombuds bring to the table, and we use a tool that he's going to name. That what is this individual in lay terms? Nothing fancy at all. Usually relatable, but advantages, disadvantages. What tools might this be, and really how can it be infused into the cultures, into the just simplicity of the layperson who doesn't have an understanding of what these processes are. And that's kind of something I'm looking forward to hearing it be brought to light. Is something just as I can read advantages, disadvantages, tools, non-tools, trying to merge the mediation, ombuds, and there are some skills that do overlap, absolutely. But I do think simplicity here is powerful, and Reese has done a really nice job to bring some fun stuff. You brought up, the Shark Tank. It's relatable. It's got a visual. It's fun. And I could see some conflicts just in that show if you bring up these topics, how that could, but it's just such a fun process to see us giggle and be lighthearted, but obviously bringing something very important into it.
Well, most important thing, Reese, what I just haven't been able to, you will tell us, but is that mate that you're drinking? That you just brought out something very interesting there. Is it mate?
Oh, it is. It is. Sorry. It is.
So now you're going to tell Melanie about mate. Please tell Melanie
so,
about it.
So this is mate. It's yerba mate, and it's a South American tea. And how I started drinking this was about, I don't know, 8 years ago on Amazon Prime. There's a plug for Amazon. You're welcome, Jeff Bezos. There was a show called Mozart in the Jungle. And it was about artists and musicians, I think, in New York City, and some of the politics and drama. And I liked the show, and one of the main characters, the maestro, would drink yerba mate. And I thought, I'm a sucker for drinks. So any new drink, you put a price tag, fancy bottle, I'm like, I'm there, here's my money. And so I'm like, I gotta try this. So I thought, let me go buy a little gourd, the tea, and the little bombilla. And what's it taste like? It tastes like hay, like straw. But I've associated it soothing, and I like the taste of it.
So
acquired taste.
What's that?
It's a big thing. Acquired taste, you say. Acquired taste.
Yeah, it is. It's like, I think anything, like wine or smoking a pipe or something. It's like, how could people stand that? It reeks. Or this again, I think when my wife and kids have tried it, it's like, it tastes like grass. I'm like, yeah, but I like it. It's an acquired taste.
Yeah, because it's a big thing in Argentina. This is a very major part of their lives. And because of the COVID, because they share the mate. They share it, and they could not do it during COVID. So it was actually affecting their social structure and their social lives to a certain extent.
I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
It was interesting. Yeah, it is.
It is.
So perfect. So I'm seeing you tomorrow, Reese, and Melanie. You listen to the recording, and then we can always have another discussion. This, like I said, that discussion on these, because I feel this is it's an area where mediators can definitely fit in. Can we divide the role and say this is the mediator part of it, and this is the other? I'm using the words, but I should not. But I'm saying conflict coach and all those words that came up in our earlier discussions. Can we divide them so that it's easier for people to understand the concept of this role? We'll take it up as we go along. But finally, I'm trying to create these mediation circles in organizations, because I'm going to call them mediation circles only. So there, the organizational mediator is going to play a role there. So that's why, these discussions I'm having to see what can really come into this role, and still keeping what the Ombuds does, but not using that word maybe, so that we can still bring that in. Can you then, if you have to get a conflict coach, can you bring in someone else? Like in a mediation, you bring in someone who's required there, and an expert on certain areas. Can that person be brought in? So something like that. I'm developing a work in progress. Let's see how it goes. So perfect. So thank you very much, both of you, coming in.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you, Vikram.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Melanie. And of course,
nice to meet you, Reese. Pleasure. I hope we'll chat again. Take care.
And I'm hoping that both of you are going to watch the first episode of Shark Tank, and Reese is going to give me a feedback tomorrow how he looks at the live thing. How is he looking at it?
If I message you, Vikram, and I say I want to say something, just let me in on the link.
You've got the link. Same link. Just drop in. Drop in whenever you. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Take care. It's been a pleasure.
It was really nice talking to both of you.
Thank
you. See you tomorrow.
Y'all have a good rest. Bye-bye.